Welcome everyone to the first virtual career week in the arts and entertainment sponsored by the Arts Council in partnership with the Career Center and the Mcmullen Museum at Boston College. This webinar is being recorded and I will be your host for the night. So my name is Rachel Chamberlain. I'm the Manager of Education, Outreach, and Digital Resources at the Mcmullen Museum of Art here at BC. And I'm pleased to be working with our students, Matt DiBenedetto, who's class of 2021, who's majoring in art history with a museum studies minor, and Victoria Pusong, who's also class of 2021, who's majoring in information systems out of CSUM, information systems and marketing, and she also is undertaking a minor in studio art. So tonight's theme is arts administration, and this is the fourth in a series of webinars this week. So please check the Arts Council webpage for additional information about this week's activities and extended bios on our panelists. The link, so I'll have ask Victoria, she can place the link to the Arts Council page in the chat box. Thank you. And so tonight's format will be to engage our panelists in conversation and to answer your questions. So please post your questions at any time, sort of in the Q&A box found at the bottom of your screen. And at approximately 6:50, we'll break out into our after parties. So these will be two separate Zoom links that we will provide in our chat box towards the end of the main webinar. They are set up so you can continue the conversation with our panelists and talk with them personally. It's also kind of just a great chance to have them see your face and for them to get to know you better as well. But now to our panelists tonight, who represent a diverse set of experiences at various points in their careers, as well as a good mix of graduation classes. So I'll give you a brief introduction. However, their full bios can be found on the Arts Council website. So tonight's guest includes, we have Haley Carey, class of 2018. And Haley is the curatorial department coordinator for the Arts of Asia and the Arts of Africa and Oceania departments at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, where she now holds an expanded role working directly under the Director of Collections. And let me stop sharing my screen so that everybody can kind of see our panelists and they can wave as I introduce them. And then we have Sarah Silva, class of 2014, and she's another Boston local who currently works at the New England Foundation for the Arts in Boston as their development officer. She also works as an instructor for Bar 3 in Brookline. We have Nzingo Williams, class of 2012. Nzinga is a New York-based company and stage manager, and she's worked on projects on and off Broadway and the high seas, such as Hair, Sleep No More, The Secret Life of Bees, Halfway Bitches Go Straight to Heaven, The Mother, Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and After Midnight, just to name a few. And she's an activist and founder of the New Black Mutual, the New Black Mutual Aid, which is a mutual aid for Black theater artists who are both on and off stage. And then we have Megan Pressman, class of 2001, and she's the managing director and CEO of the Center Theater Group in Los Angeles, and has held numerous administrative positions, including as the managing director of the Woolly Mammoth Theater Company in DC, the director of development for the Signature Theater in New York, the associate managing director of Berkeley Rep, and the managing director for the ground floor Berkeley Rep Center for the Creation and Development of New York, among several others. And last but not least, we have Jennifer Patton from class of 2009. And Jennifer currently serves as the head of school for the Martha Graham School of Contemporary Dance in New York City. And over the years, she's done a great deal of work in curriculum development, arts integrated education, and administrative leadership. So I want to welcome our esteemed alumni and thank you all for returning to Boston College to talk with our students. So I am going to dive right in and kick us off with a question posed to all of you about your career path after graduating from BC. Kind of more specifically, what did you do at BC to cultivate or explore the skills that you're currently using? For example, did you pursue majors related to your current career, or was it something else that kind of pushed you towards what you're doing now? And I'll let you guys jump in as you like?
So I can jump in. My internet is also jumping in and out, so I'm going to take advantage of the moments when it's working well. So at BC, I actually was a music major and an English major. So I studied the cello while I was at BC, but I had danced recreationally my entire life. The dance organization of Boston College. So choreographed for them. I served as the secretary in my junior and senior years. And then afterwards, was kind of torn between this love for the arts as an academic discipline, but also performance, but also there's lots of ways to run the arts and everything else. And I found myself right after my time at BC pursuing a master's in historical musicology out at Northwestern. And I intentionally went for that master's because I was like, I don't know if I can commit to a PhD yet. I don't know if this is what I want, but I need to get some sense of, my course in life. So master's is kind of the nice compromise. And it was a nice concrete 1-year program out in Chicago, and quickly found out that I did not want to pursue a PhD. I just wanted to feel like my work had more, for me, a feeling of immediate impact, that I was contributing to sort of the arts and service of people. And so what I found myself doing after that was joining Teach for America. And when I joined Teach for America, I got placed in Providence, Rhode Island, as part of the pilot corps. And while I was in, it so happened that a brand new charter school for the performing arts was opening up, and they were looking for Teach for America members. And so I ended up getting hired as the English and history teacher there, but also serving to develop and coordinate all the arts integration with the dance department, the music, the film, the theater departments. And then after 2 years in the classroom, became their curriculum director. So all of this to say, up until this point, it was a lot of twists and turns and determining, I don't want to do that. I'm not really clear on that. I really like this, but I feel like I want to try this out. And it was a lot of experimentation. And it was while I was doing all of that work at TAPA, especially as a curriculum director, that I really realized I loved administration. I loved being able to run design programs. And there was this little field called arts administration that I had heard of, but I didn't really know anything about what it was or what it entailed. But then there was a whole degree program dedicated to it at Columbia, which is where I ended up going for that master's. And while I was there, in a very New York moment, went to a cocktail party after a show at Martha Graham, and fell in conversation trying to look for an internship, and kind of walked away with a consultantship that led to a job. So it was a lot of right place, right time, a fair bit of luck, some serendipity in there too. But I will say that my time at BC, particularly running that, being a part of the executive board with the dance organization of Boston College, serving as a publications assistant with the music department, these were all things that kind of set me down that path, but a little subconsciously. And then through various twists and turns, found myself in the field that I'm in now. So.
Thank you. Someone else want to take it
I can go. So fun fact, I actually, when I got into BC, I was pre-med for the first 2 years. My freshman year, I think right before my freshman year, I met a senior who was like, yeah, I need an ASM for a show. And I'd always loved stage managing. I think I just have always had a kind of little bossy air about me. So that was something I always loved. Being on stage is cool, but there's something about being kind of like the doula for a show, that was really beautiful for me. So I started my freshman year. For I think the first or second show, I was assistant stage managing, and I, by the end of my freshman year, I'd worked on like 3 or 4 shows, or 3 or 4 shows. By the end of my sophomore year, I was like, I'd done so many things, and I went into my advisor's office and was like, I don't know what to do. He was like, well, I feel like you do know what to do. And I did. So I changed my major. While at my time at BC, I always knew I wanted to stage manage. I loved stage managing. I never wanted to act or do anything other than that. So I really threw myself into that. If you're a theater major at BC, there's no, well, I don't know about now, but there was no like stage management track lane. So I kind of created one for myself in the best way that I could. I stage managed as much as I could. My sophomore year, I did the like outside director who did a show called Translations, which was really great. I was also paying my way through college, so I was always working, but I knew that I always wanted to be close to what I loved. So I would work in the back office. I would work in the box office. I stage managed every single DE show. So it's funny you said dance, like every single DE show, dance ensemble show for all 4 years. And some of those girls actually became great friends of mine. So I knew I wanted to stage manage. After my sophomore year, when I, was very conflicted as what to do, I decided, okay, I'm going to dive in. And if I'm going to do that, the best place to figure out if this is what I want to do is New York, right? So the summer between my sophomore and my junior year, I had my first summer working in New York, and it's hard. I'm forgetting all of the timeline of it all, but I worked in this for New York Classical Theater, which is a small little theater that did a lot of really cool Shakespeare stuff. I didn't love it, but I really liked, I didn't love it, but I liked the work, if that made sense. So I knew this is what I wanted to be doing. And I can't remember if it was that year or the year after, I ended up working I spent the summer working as a PA for hair on Broadway, which was really cool. I worked off Broadway with smaller theater companies and created just kind of like a little theater family. It was really great. I was always the youngest one, kind of like, this is fun. And it gave me a lot of opportunities to stage manage and to kind of apply the things that I'd known in a safe environment at BC in New York. So that was really great. So I spent, like I said, I spent most of college stage managing. If there was a thing, I stage managed it. I ASM'd, I don't know if you guys still have this, I don't think you do, but Christmas Reflections, I think is what it's called now. It's a dancer's Christmas is what it was my first few years. And so that, I did that. I did several shows. And then by the time I was graduating, I had put down roots in New York. I had, talked to people and hobnobbed and done all that stuff. So I figured, let's do this. So I bought a burrito from Mcmullen and got in a U-Haul truck and, drove all night to New York City. That summer I'd worked, that was when they first opened, oh gosh, what's the name of the place? Anyways, I don't remember it. They first opened this like little this venue on 54 Below. See, on 50, they first opened 54 Below, and I started working there a little bit. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I started sending out applications and that sort of thing. I ended up getting this little tour thing, and I went out on that for a few months, which was really great. After that, I stage managed Sleep No More, which was super interesting. It had been, I'd seen Sleep No More when it was in Boston, the original one, and it was really beautiful. It was like a very transformative thing for me, just because it really changed the way that I viewed theater. I was like, oh, even as an audience member, we're all on this journey together, right? We're active no matter if we're sitting down or if we're running around in rooms, and that really changed it for me. So being able to work on that was really beautiful. I worked on several different things here and there. I worked for Production Corps, which did different things, which did like Peter and the Starcatcher off Broadway and like some other things. I would be assistant assistant production manager, stage manager. I also sound designed when I was at BC, which was something that I really, really, really enjoyed. And at the time, it was all dudes, and me being like, "Hey, George, want to teach me how to do things?" And they did. So I got to apply that in some different ways. At a point in time, I just got really burned out. I had been going hard doing all these things and I was exhausted. I was like, I'm going to take a little bit of a break. So I started part-timing at a professional performing arts school, which is not taking a break. If you're wondering, it's more like ramping everything up. But it was so beautiful because it really lit a fire in me. These students who were professional actors but also so early in their journey as artists. It was just a really amazing thing to be a part of. So I was doing that for a little bit. At the same time, at some point in time, I would do that. I would do business management for high net worth entertainers. So essentially, when you get to a certain point of having money and celebrity, you don't touch your own money. And a lot of those are actors, singers, that sort of thing. So I was in charge of a few accounts and doing that. So I would do that from 7 a.m. to 3. I would go into the school and do their after school thing, do this whatever seminar. And then I would go and stage manage a show that night. And I would get called in to sometimes sub on certain things. And yeah, so that was my day. And at some point in time, I got a email that was like, or an email that turned into a call that said, "Hey, do you want to just come stage manage this stuff on a ship?" And I said, sure. I was in the point in my life where I needed a little bit of a change. Just being in New York was exhausting, as I think anybody who has lived in New York knows. You got to get away from it to really appreciate it, which has made quarantine hard. So I did that. I worked on ships for 2 years. Yeah, 3 contracts in 2 years. I got to work with some really amazing artists, some really amazing directors and designers, and that was really cool. And at some point in time, I knew this isn't what I wanted to be doing for a long term. While ships were really cool, and they seem very grandiose, as a stage manager, you're working 7 days a week for, well, they say the contracts are 6 months, but I got extended. So my one of mine was like 9. I had one that was 8 months, So 7 days a week, about 12 hours a day, no days off for months on end, and you get exhausted. And it becomes less about the art and more about the structure, the naval structure, which gets very exhausting. And as a stage manager on the ship, there are aspects of your job in which you act as company manager, right? You're in charge of your cast. You're in charge of where they go and making sure they have everything they need. You work in tandem with your with a person who is more in charge of like entertainment, but for the most part, it's just you. And especially if you're a main stage manager, everything that goes on in that state, any entertainment that goes on in the main theater, that is yours. And it was beautiful. It was really great. I got to flex a lot of the muscles that I really loved. But I knew this wasn't what I wanted to be doing long term. And I got a call from somebody who I had worked with for years. And she was like, "Hey, there's a company manager position at Atlantic Theater Company," which, if you don't know Atlantic, we originated Spring Awakening and Guards at the Taj, and oh gosh, I can't remember off the top of my head. There's a bunch of really great shows, it's been really great. And so I said, yeah, that sounds great. 4 interviews later, I touched down, and then I got the job. I touched down after my contract ended, and 5 days later I started my job, which is I'm currently the company manager at Atlantic. It's been really great. we can talk more about what I do later on, but so we do a lot of stuff. So essentially, a lot of the work that I had done at BC, I was very focused. I've always been like, I know what I want. I'm very headstrong, despite my Aquarian nature. So I always really knew what I wanted, and I knew that even when that wasn't what I was doing, like, you know, when I was pre-med or doing whatever, I knew I wanted to be close to the art, and I kept that mentality when I left college, right? So any like survival job I got, they were all theater adjacent. They were all somewhere close to the building, somewhere close to the people, because I knew that it was important to like know people and be there and to understand, and especially for me as a manager and as a leader, it's really important for me to understand what it is I do and who it is I am. I don't even say managing, but like leading and helping and working with. And so,
Right, kind of
in order to
knowing
do
all
that,
those different facets. Yeah.
exactly. So you got to do some research. So when I was at BC, I did everything from I've done obviously run crew. I've done I did wardrobe, I did sound, I did some lighting, I did a little bit of everything. So that when I asked, you know, when I'm on a contract and I asked my light designer, hey, can we get this done in this time period? I know I'm not asking you anything that isn't ridiculous.
Sure.
And I can also understand when you say, hey, these are the things that I'm looking at that this isn't helpful for me. So yeah, BC and BC really helps me with that, having a very well-rounded idea of what it is to be in theater. So
Great.
yeah.
Great. So how about Sarah, do you want to kind of talk about sort of your pathway?
Sure. I was going to jump in right after Nzingo because Nzingo and I were at BC at the same time, and she talked a lot about stage management and the pathways that we created for her. And I just want to credit her with creating so many pathways that were then handed down to me 2 years later. I graduated in 2014, and I majored in theater and history with a focus in Irish studies. So where else but BC? What a perfect place to be for those interests. So I also focused on stage management for the most part at BC. I thought, this is it. This is going to be great. Very differently, I came into BC like, I'm going to be a Broadway actress. Watch me go, hear me sing. And I went to my first audition and I got no callbacks and I was devastated. And I was like, this is it. This is the end of my career. And I immediately was
At your first audition.
Yeah, you were. And not Nzingo, but someone else immediately asked me, would you like to be an assistant stage manager? And I said, okay, fine. Like I'll stay involved, similar, I'll stay close. And I loved it. And it really, as you said, Nzingo lit a fire in me about the organizational piece, the administration piece, the ability to see the big picture and be supportive of the art. And I think that's what I took away for the most part from BC is the generalist program in theater. Was this idea of how many puzzle pieces go into the art, whether it's theater, any other type of performance, visual art, etc. I feel like especially growing up, I grew up in a small town in Florida, and I was like, the person doing the thing, that's it. You know, you go see the tour and you see the person on stage and it's like, that must be what it is. And to learn so much deeper was really awesome. So I actually stage managed for DO. So thank you for passing that down to me. So hooray for DO, Jennifer. When I graduated, like I say, I also studied history. So I kind of went back and forth about what my next steps would be. I decided I had a wonderful mentor in Elizabeth Bouchard, who is a stage management adjunct professor at BC. And I sat down to a lunch right before graduation with her, Billy McEntee, who's now in New York, and Sarah Komorowski. And we were all like, we kind of like admin, we kind of like academics, like we're not sure where to go. We all love writing. And she was really supportive in terms of like, here's what stage management could look like for you. But at that point, she had transitioned to a more arts admin track, working actually in the job that I have now. She had when I was talking with her. So she's been a wonderful guide for me. So talk with your professors. If you think you have something in common or you think they're doing something you like, tell them. And I won't put more work on them, but it really worked for me. So we had this talk. I said, okay, I'll try stage management. And within about 7 months, I decided, similar Jennifer, nope, this isn't for me. This isn't a lifestyle, like Nzingo was saying, that I think is manageable. And And at the same time, I was dating someone very seriously. His name is John, who was also really involved in theater. And he said, I'm going to law school down in Philadelphia. I was working in Boston at the time, and I had to make a big life choice of like, do I follow a boy, which did kind of rubbed me the wrong way, or do I continue in this track that I'm not really loving? So I went, and it was great. I worked in retail for 6 months, and I learned so much, and was feeling a little lost, but good, and discovered that he went to Villanova University for law school, discovered they had a master's in theater program that was fully funded through fellowships. So if you could achieve a fellowship at the university, you didn't have to take on any loans, which was very important to me. So I said, you know what, that sounds like a great way to spend 2 years. And so I went, achieved that. I got the certificate in nonprofit management as well, because I had had these conversations with Elizabeth along the lines of, I think that might be where my skills align. And actually, I, in that time, discovered about myself, as much as I love being in the art, and I stage managed at Villanova, and I worked at Fringe Arts at the time, and had a lot of connections in the arts community in Philly, I really enjoyed the kind of higher level, like a lot of folks I think who pursue the PhD track kind of go, because they want to be closer. I went the other way. I was like, I love this kind of like all encompassing overview and analysis of the theory and thinking about systems of change and things like that. So I got really deep down that track and leaned into dramaturgy for that reason, and a lot more of the history within theater, which combined a lot of my loves. So I graduated and was, again, kind of at a place of, well, I love admin, and now I have some extra skills in that, and I still love this dramaturgy piece. So beautiful sign when I did not get into the PhD programs that I applied for. It was a very good moment of failure for me. We said we learn more from our failures than from our achievements. So it was a good moment to reflect, to pause. And Elizabeth, who'd had the job that I have now, got back in touch with me and said, actually, it's open. I think you'd be a great fit. I think it would be a ton of fun. The organization itself was at a shifting period and was looking for new blood, new thoughts, new ideas to come in. And so I came in. And as with a lot of fundraising, I'm interested to hear your perspective, Megan. Sometime at conferences about arts fundraising specifically, there's a lot of like, well, I didn't want to, but here I am. and that is what happened. I didn't say, I really want to be a fundraiser, but now that I'm here, I absolutely love it. And I do focus more on grant writing and things like that, which really taps into the history major work that I was able to do, the writing heavy pieces at BC, even in my theater courses. Like I took a lot of the musical theater course and things like that, where you're analyzing and doing that deep research work. So that's what I'm passionate about.
Great, thanks so much, Sarah. And maybe we'll treat this, sort of like they do in the debates, and since Megan, your name was mentioned, I'll hand it over to you.
Sure, happy to go next. Hi, everybody. I'm glad for everyone who's here today and your interest. I was a theater major at BC. I was class of 01. I started as a math and chemistry double major, and because I think I wanted to, I don't know, convince myself or my parents that I wasn't going to go into theater. My mom was an actress, and my dad had a lot of, he's a doctor with a lot of patience in the business. So I knew I was passionate about it, but was able to slip into being a major because I had AP'd out of all of my first year requirements in math and science. So took a bunch of theater classes and then just basically registered as a theater major and didn't look back. When I was in the theater program, we only really had acting and directing courses that I recall. There were 2 classes for administration at the time. I don't think we had stage management classes. We had like elements of theater and costume design and stuff like that, but it wasn't the widest curriculum. I don't feel like as students we had a lot of knowledge of kind of regional or even national internships. So at the time I was very focused on the acting part of the program and directing, and I did a bunch of student club leadership. So I was involved in a bunch of different student clubs. I eventually was the first female president of the Committee for Creative Enactments Murder Mystery Group. Very proud. That's where I got a lot of the producing side of stuff, a kind of an experience in budget management, and I really enjoyed doing that in the artistic side. I left after BC. I moved back. I'm from New York, so I moved back to New York and was in a 2-year-long acting program called the New Actors Workshop. And after the first year, decided to leave that and go to Northwestern, where I also went for a master's. I had applied right as I was graduating school, but deferred a year because I wasn't sure if I wanted to do more acting or more kind of other side that was not acting. So after the year of acting in New York, I actually really felt like the thing I wanted to do was the other track. So I went to Chicago, and it's a program that doesn't really exist anymore, but it was a 4-quarter or 12-month program. So you could get it done in a full calendar year with a master's degree in theater, where I concentrated. I still took some performance classes, but I did creative drama, children's theater, and I also did production management. After that, I started a theater company with a bunch of folks that I graduated with for young audiences, because at the time there was not a major theater for young audiences in Chicago. There had been some in the past, but the kind of biggest one had gone out of business about 10 years prior. So we were like, we're going to do that. So in that company, I filled the role of managing director and general manager and understudy, and did some performances on tours, like the kind of thing that you do in your early 20s in particular, especially in towns like Chicago and New York. So I was also doing improv at Second City and freelancing. And I had a staff job at Northwestern for a number of years in the theater department, which was the only thing that paid bills out of all of those things. So in the midst of all that, I realized that what I was really drawn to was the producing side of theater, became more interested in, I'm a school person, so academic training made sense to me. So I was looking mostly at local programs, but applied to Carnegie Mellon, and which was a little bit farther away with their 1 or 2 year master's in arts management program. DePaul had a program. So I was really looking kind of in the Midwest region. I had taken the GREs my senior year at BC, the morning after the Gatsby Ball, which if you guys still have it, don't take a standardized test the next day. But I did somehow did okay on them, but my scores were expiring. So they last 5 years, and year 5, basically I was like, I should apply to grad school because I don't want to do that again. So this is how strategic careers can be. So I took took the chance to apply to a bunch of schools. The one that I applied to totally on a whim, because it had the same application process as DePaul, was Yale. Didn't really intend or want to go to a 3-year program, but I had a lot of friends who spoke really highly of it. So I figured I would go through the process and see where it took me. I applied to the theater management program there and got an interview. And through the course of the interview process, realized that was really a program I was super interested in. So I got accepted into that. I turned 3 years into 4. I stayed and did the MBA, which you have to apply to separately. So I went to the Yale School of Drama and the Yale School of Management. And you kind of do 2 years in drama, 1 year in management, and then the 4th year in both, which if you can survive the 4th year in both, no other job I've had until the COVID year has been as difficult. So with that, by that point, I was about 10 years out of BC and was set up really well for kind of a regional theater career. I was on a track where I wanted to have a managing director job, but you kind of have to hit some stops along the way. So the 2 paths are really work your way up from within bigger companies, or kind of get a smaller managing director job at like a small company and kind of grow in company size. So I did a little bit more of the first. So that's where you heard my bio earlier. I jumped around at a bunch of different companies in interesting like middle senior management career roles. That's how I got into development, which was I have to demonstrate development and fundraising acumen. So found a way to get into a development role. And through that got my first managing director role in DC, where I was for 5 seasons. I've just been in LA for about a year and a half. So that's the path. I would say a lot of it was not totally intentional. So it really has a lot to do with what's in front of your face and what decisions you kind of find, or what network you have. I ended up at Berkeley Rep because I had a semester-long fellowship there. And when I was graduating grad school, the person who had been my boss said, do you want us to like work together? Why don't we apply for a grant? So she was an incredibly important mentor to me. I think mentorship is super important in these business areas. So I was able to go out there. They created a job for me because we got the grant, and so on. So I think at some point I all of a sudden realized that meant I was moving to California, which had not been on my like to-do list. but it's kind of like where the work has been most interesting is where I've gone. So connecting that back to BC, certainly about being in college, and I think Nzingo said this, being really open to the opportunities that you find, and taking the chance to do projects that you wouldn't normally do, or a class that you wouldn't normally do. I think that the well-roundedness and the opportunities was so important to me, ending up in such a different space than where I started. I'll leave it at that for now.
Thanks, Megan. And Haley.
Yeah, so my career story is pretty short because I've only been out of school for a couple years, but I came into BC and pretty early on decided to be an art history major with a minor in French and ancient civilizations, with the intention of being a classical art curator. And I was lucky enough to have an internship at the Mcmullen starting freshman year, and I continued that all 4 years. And my junior year, the student ambassador program started, which was great because I got paid. And then I also was an assistant conservator at the Burns Library, which is the rare text library at BAPST. And I also had an internship summer junior and senior year at the MFA, which is where I made a lot of great connections. And it's also where I learned I didn't want to be a curator. And also realized that there's a whole bunch of other people at museums that make things happen. And so I decided that collections management was actually where I wanted to be. And so my work at the Mcmullen definitely helped with that. I worked with Diana and managing the collection and the new digitization of the collection at that point. And then I graduated, and I was able, after a whole bunch of interviews, to get a temp position as the department coordinator in the Art of Asia and the Art of Africa and Oceania departments, which eventually turned into a permanent job. And then my boss, who is the department head of Art of Africa and Oceania, which that department is only 1.5 people, the curator and half of my time, was promoted to director of collections, and she asked me to continue on as her executive assistant. So added another job title into my list, and that's where we are.
Awesome. Thank you guys all so much. It sounds like there was a really good sort of note on Monday night where someone mentioned stumbling productively. Again, sort of like taking these opportunities as they come and sort of learning from each of them. Since we have about 12 to 15 minutes left here, I'm actually going to kind of pivot over to the Q&A. And for those of you who are attending and you have questions that you'd like to ask our panelists, don't forget to put your questions in the Q&A box kind of at the bottom right of your screen. So why don't I actually turn it over to Victoria to have her kind of pull out one of those questions that's in the Q&A box.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, so we have one question from Isabel, and I'm guessing this is addressed to everyone, so whoever can answer, just jump in. She's asking, what is the most challenging part of your job, and what is the most rewarding part?
I gotcha. So company management is, most of you probably don't know what company managers do because most people don't teach what company managers are. That's not you generally don't get that. I like to say that it's where the paper and the people meet, where stage managers are micro, company managers are more macro. And so that means I got a lot of moving things at all times. It feels a lot of the time like I am juggling and then with one hand and then trying to put out a fire with the other hand and doing it with a smile. And so that, I think I would say that's probably one of the most challenging parts of my job is actually dealing with unions, because while they're great and amazing and very necessary, very pro-union, equity can be a little challenging at times. And I saw you smile, Megan, because I know you know what I'm talking about. So I would say that's probably one of the like those that's the stuff that's like not as exciting. Well, not it is exciting to me, but it's a little bit more challenging. I mean, before the pandemic, I spent a day, literally a day. I had a whole long to-do list of things to do, and I spent, I would say, 4 or 5 hours on the phone with Equity trying to get them to release the bonds of something that we of our last season, which it's all jargon right now, but essentially I was on the phone with them, and they were going, oh well, I didn't see that we did this, and they were asking me questions from a year before, so things like that can be very tedious. I think like I said prior, there is a culture in theater that expects you to put yourself last at times, and that's something that I think that we have the power to change, and hopefully after COVID we do, because we see how unproductive it really is, and I think that's probably one of the most challenging things, because I before COVID, I would wake up and the first thing I did was look at my phone and answer emails. And then I would eat breakfast while answering emails. And then I'd go to the bathroom, and then I'd take a shower, and then I'd get out and I'd answer emails, and I would do it on the train ride to work, and then be there till, 10, 11. So that's challenging. But I think one of the most rewarding, there's so many things that I love about my job. Like so many. I love being in the room. That moment where everybody gets it, and I don't know how to explain it. It's just this feeling, and it's like everybody's kind of like on one accord. Maybe your MD is teaching you a new part, and everybody's like, okay, let's do this. All right, you guys are gonna sing this, and you're gonna do that, and whatnot, and everybody kind of gets it, and then everybody in the room who's watching is like, oh, that's what the show is. Those moments are beautiful. Those moments where people come out of the theater and they're crying and they're talking about the show, and it's created conversations and and real social change within these people's microcosms. Like those are the moments that I love, that I cherish, that I care about. Those I love. I don't know if I said this before, but I love being like the doula, right? Like the person that's kind of like going to help you do this thing. You're doing the thing, but I'm just here to be a support, a catch-all, a bra, if you will. And that's really, it's really beautiful to me. So that's the thing I like the most.
How about Jennifer? What are your greatest challenges, greatest rewards?
I mean, very similarly, it's the idea of the little fires. That can be one of the most challenging things. You can go in and have a set plan for your entire day or your entire week, and you're not revisiting that plan for another 3 weeks. It's one of those things, especially when you're working with people. There's quite a lot in there that becomes very unpredictable. I mean, COVID was a case in point for that, right? It wasn't just a matter of, say, running a dance school and then all of a sudden there's a pandemic and now, okay, well, how do you get everything online? It was also about things like, how do I coordinate my students who are international, get them back home? How do I deal with faculty and staff who are, now spread throughout all over the country? How are we navigating different time zones from LA to Tokyo or, whatever it is? And these are just kind of the unexpected things. And we had a marvelous plan for our spring of 2020, just like everybody else, I think, did. So, and that's on a grander scale, but that happens even at the most mundane of times. You're going into work and then all of a sudden there's a student issue, or the auditor wants a document you haven't looked at for 5 months, or, something like that. And those constant little interruptions. But I'd say this is one of the things that also makes the job extraordinarily rewarding. and getting all of those little pieces in place, when you start catching up with all the little fires, these are the things that you know are making the organization run and thrive. And along those lines, I would say that the most satisfying part of the job, at least for me, it's been so centered on education. So of course it's my students, you know, and watching them get that leg up, you know, whether I was teaching English and history and watching them make connections with film and theater, or I am watching somebody who just got into the Martha Graham Dance Company because they trained with us for 4 years and now they finally like broke through that doorway. So I say that at the end of the day, all those little fires make it so rewarding, because all those little fires, once you're tackling with them, are exactly what support, for in my case, all of my students pursuing exactly what they want to achieve. And that's a very, very exciting thing to watch over time.
Others want to step in? Greatest challenges and rewards? I'm going to pick on Haley since she used to work with me. Haley, how about you?
I was pausing, so I was trying to think of the greatest reward. There's a lot of challenges. My job is very, very broad, and I have my hand in almost every section of the museum. I manage the finances, I manage the collection, I manage the donor circles, I manage the curators. So it's a lot of work every day, and a lot of little things, like everyone else has said, and putting out those little fires. And so just time management, and, you know, trying to get everything done and prioritizing what are the big things that need to get done so that things can move forward. That's probably the biggest challenge. For me, the biggest reward working in curatorial is just being close to the collections. I wanted to stay in a curatorial role, even if I didn't want to be a curator, because I love working with art. I love working with the conservators and listening to all of these experts talk about things that they're so passionate about. And even if I don't have a background in any of the art that I work with, just seeing people who spent their entire lives studying these subjects and studying these specific objects is insanely rewarding.
Thanks, Haley. Megan? How about you?
Sure. You know, so much of what we do is everything is very people focused. So that's the answer for both the most challenging and most rewarding is the working with people. So, you know, the most rewarding is being able to kind of fulfill people's dreams, to build better life experiences for our audience, to support staff, to, you know, all of that is the most rewarding. It's all very kind of human experience focused. And the most challenging stuff is working with people. It's the kind of thing you don't learn a lot about in school. I've been to a lot of schools, and understanding how to kind of help manage, supervise human resources is one of the hardest things all the time. People are complex beings who have very diverse needs, and figuring out how to be present for them, how to be equitable, how to be inclusive, all of the things that we're talking about all the time these days is really it's not that that's not rewarding, but it is by far the most challenging work that I've done in pretty much all of my stops along the road.
And Sarah.
Sure. It's like if we have time. I think I'll start with the most rewarding piece of my work right now is that the fact that I work for a regional foundation, we're the New England Foundation for the Arts, so we do cover all 6 New England states, means that pre-COVID and in a different way post-COVID or in COVID, there's no post yet, had a lot of opportunities to travel and like see all kinds of the different pieces of New England. So I got to go to Jacob's Pillow, which as a dancer growing up was incredibly powerful, and to go to their archives, I was like crying. It's so exciting. And to know that we support them from that more foundation role was really valuable. And I got to go up to like the top of Vermont and go to a college and speak there. So I think being part of that regional in a different way than a regional theater, or a lot of the ways that like I thought of regional before, is really, really valuable. And we work a lot with government. So a lot of like the state arts agencies and the NEA. So I've learned a ton about those structures that I never would have otherwise. So that's been really rewarding. I think one of the bigger challenges is my current department is a 2-person department. And as I said, when I joined the organization, which was 3 years ago, they were in a period of transition. And are we doing what we want to be doing? Are our programs matching our mission, strategic planning, et cetera? And I think coming out of that, there was like a really big growth and excitement about new opportunities and development, like events and text to give and all these different technologies that are coming out. And now, especially with all the technology that we're using every day, there's a constant, like, Sarah, you're the development officer. Like, don't you know how to use Blue Jean, this product you can have a virtual event on? And I'm like, whoa, I'm going to need a couple months to like figure out what it is. Can we use it? What's it cost? So I think having a small team that is like bursting at the seams with opportunity, again, awesome, but also can be challenging when I'm like, if there's 8 projects, I'm going to need longer timelines.
Thank you. So I want to make sure our student Matt gets a chance to ask one of these questions, because he put together one for each of you. And while we won't have time to go through all of them, he can bring some to the breakout room as well. But I thought, Matt, do you want to ask like one question and pick one of our panelists? Oh, you're muted. Oh, there we go.
Sure. So actually I have a question for Haley. So how did your work as a student ambassador at the Mcmullen and as a conservation intern at the Burns Library prepare you for your position at the MFA?
Well, it did prepare me. I will say that it really did help prepare me. In terms of my role as a conservator, that is something that I would recommend anyone who wants to go into museums to work with conservation, because it's a part of museum work that's often overlooked, and they're incredibly educated and amazing people. And just as someone who has worked in conservation, being able to work closely with the conservators at the MFA and tell them that I worked in conservation gets me a lot of points. And they are much happier to work with me. And in terms of my work at the Mcmullen, I think the best part about that was that I saw how many different parts are part of museum work. I worked with Rachel in education when I was a student ambassador, and also, just working the front desk and greeting the public, which is a huge part of my job, is working with the public. And then also working with Diana and going through the collections and handling the collections and being trained in care and handling. That is also a giant part of my role, and just being able to see how many different people it takes and how many different specific experiences people need in order to make a museum run. It was a really, really important part of my career journey.
Awesome, thanks, Haley. So at this point, I want to give a big kind of virtual round of applause to our panelists for joining us tonight. And it has been such a pleasure getting to know all of you better. And a special thank you to Matt and Victoria for kind of guiding us through the evening, as well as to you, our attendees, for joining us. However, the night is not over, so please join us for one of 2 or both after parties where you can personally talk to these panelists. So we will also bring any questions that we weren't able to address from the Q&A in the webinar portion. So feel free to go between the Zoom links and do some networking, and we'll wrap up until 7:30 p.m. So the links for these separate Zoom meetups and the alumni attendees can now be found in the chat box, or we're sort of adding them now. So you can choose which one you'd like to go to. They are also in the email that you got for confirmation for registration. So you can find them there too. And likewise for our panelists, you feel free. So in the first breakout room, we will have Haley, Sarah, and Jennifer. And then in breakout room 2, we'll have Megan and Nzingo. Great, so let me just make sure, do we have those up? Great, okay, so then I'm going to jump out and I will see you guys on the other side. Thank you again.